everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Boy, that feels good to say again. Thank you to everyone who has stuck around through my unintentional hiatus and for watching this video once again. Today we are finally going to be taking a look at the Roman Szmal Aquarius Watercolors. This is a review that I have been wanting to do since last fall, and it's taken the better part of a year for it to see the light of day. However, the good news is that I've had a lot of time to use, study, and experiment with these watercolors in the meantime, so I hope that the information in this video will be useful for you. This is a fairly new brand of watercolors out of Poland by artist Roman Szmal. I believe that I first heard about them last summer when they were still difficult to acquire in the US. They are now available on Jackson's Art, making them easy to acquire wherever Jackson's ships. Aquarius launched with a huge 140 color lineup, 117 of which are single pigments. The line quickly became recognized for some of the really unique pigments that aren't widely available elsewhere, as well as some really gorgeous specialty granulating colors that we'll take a closer look at in just a bit. According to Jackson's, these paints are made in small batches with pigments, gum arabic, honey, and distilled water. They are currently, as far as I can tell, only available in full pans, though I do want to note that because of their honey-based formula, and perhaps a bit of luck with my Central Texas high humidity here, I was able to scoop out some of the paint and add a couple colors to my main palette without any problem. One pretty unique quality to this fairly large-scale lineup is that every pan is wrapped in a hand-painted watercolor label showing you exactly what's going to be on the inside. I would like to note that I have 25 colors for them, which we will be taking a look at in this video, but if you would like to see the full range of colors, please check out Autocano's video series here on YouTube or Jane Blundell's blog for the full range of colors. I'll link both in the description below, and both are amazing resources if you're looking to purchase this brand. While selecting my own colors, I decided that I wanted to try out some of the less common pigments from the line, but I also wanted to balance that with some classic palette staples. Overall, I decided to go with Cerulean Hue PY151, a semi-transparent neutral yellow, Permanent Yellow PY139, a semi-transparent warm yellow or yellow-orange, Benzimidazole Orange PO36, a semi-opaque, rich though slightly desaturated middle orange, Scarlet Red PR166, a mostly transparent, warm coral red, Aquarius Red PR214, a semi-opaque, fire engine neutral red, Anthraquinone Red PR177, a transparent, deep, cool red, not a pink, Perylene Violet PV29, which leans a little bit more saturated than I have seen from this color in other brands, Dioxazine Violet, made with PV37 instead of PV23, this version leans a little bit warmer than you're probably used to seeing for this color. Mineral Violet, made from PB29 and PV19. This color is similar to Daniel Smith's Rose of Ultramarine, but it leans more towards the ultramarine than the rose, and this swatch doesn't do it very much justice. If you add enough water, it spreads out beautifully. Manganese Violet, made from PV16, a richly pigmented version of this color with soft granulation. Shadow Violet, made from PG50, PB29, and PV19. This is a highly granulating, soft shadow color that separates into its various pigments on the paper, and it quickly became a new favorite color of mine. Indian Throne Blue PB60. This isn't my favorite version of this color. It is very saturated, but it has a bit of an odd texture to it. Cobalt Colon Blue? I'm not quite sure how to say that, but it's PB35 and it is a light, bright, granulating, warm blue. Phthalo Turquoise PB16, which is a very cool, transparent cyan type of blue. Ocean Blue, made from PBR24 and PB15:3, is similar in mass tone to Phthalo Turquoise, but it's less transparent, and it separates out into its two pigment components in wet washes. Aquarius Green, made from PY150, PBR25, and PB29, is similar or reminiscent to Undersea Green by Daniel Smith. Hooker Green, made from PY150 and PB27, is my preferred sap green-like color from their range. The color that they have called sap green is a little bit too bright for my preference. Green Earth PG23 is a lightly valued semi-opaque green with low tinting strength. Natural Sienna Light PY43 is a mostly transparent yellow ochre adjacent color. Red Ochre PR102 is a semi-opaque earth red. Transparent Brown PBR23 is a transparent red earth. Caput Mortem PR102 is a purplish brown ochre that granulates even more heavily than I've seen from other brands. Cypress Burnt Umber PBR7 is a standard burnt umber that has a little bit less body than I typically prefer in my earth colors. Vine Black, made from PBK8, is a weaker, warm, granulating black. And I also have Mars Black PBK11, which is the most neutral, solid, matte black that I have ever seen in watercolors, and it also granulates. As I've mentioned, I have had plenty of time to play around with these paints. I made a variety of sketches using these colors and then recorded my first full painting with this brand as a real-time video over on Patreon back in February. It took a little over 2 hours and was primarily painted using only the red ochre and shadow violet. It's still one of my favorite paintings to date, but it did have its challenges. If you'd like to watch that painting come together in real time, or perhaps even give it a shot yourself, all of my past tutorials are accessible on Patreon for just $5 a month. The main painting that I created for this video took over a dozen hours to paint, so rather than looking at a bunch more slides first, we are just going to go straight into the demo so I can share my experience using these paints with all of you. These paints re-wet easily in my climate, and right off the bat, I will tell you that these are some of the most pigmented watercolors I have ever used. Both their vibrancy and some of their gorgeous granulating mixtures that they offer are intoxicating. And if you are only basing your opinion of this brand from those swatches alone, they'd be some of the most incredible paints on the market. Their high flow in water also makes them stand out when used in wet and wet washes. However, did you notice that the painting of the tiger went edge to edge, and that this one does too? Well, if you know my work, you'll know that that's not typically my style. I usually fade off my paintings to the white of the background, and that was originally the intent for this painting too when I did the initial sketch many months ago. However, that was before I had a chance to get to know these paints better. These watercolors are so good at flowing that they just keep flowing and flowing and flowing. No matter how much water you add or how far you draw the washout, you will still end up with a hard edge of pigment on the end when it dries. Now, everyone has different styles and techniques that they use when they are painting. For someone who uses a more stylized approach and perhaps has line art to frame those washes in, I have heard that this brand is a dream to work with due to its vibrancy and texture. However, for someone like me who works in small, little micro layers and blends off almost every brushstroke in some way or another, these paints were exhausting to use. I don't mind them in a sketchbook setting, but for these full bleed paintings, it's a lot of extra work. Now, to be fair, I knew that this particular piece was going to take me longer than my other pieces usually do because of the subject matter. If you haven't noticed yet, this isn't exactly the realistic wildlife that I usually paint. So some of my time poured into this piece was because it was a less familiar subject. However, even taking that into consideration, this took an excessive 14 or 15 hours or so over the course of 4 days to complete, and a lot of that was due to how I had to work with the paints to make them work with my personal style. I very intentionally left the first part of this demonstration in real time so that you could see how the paints handle and flow in washes. I also left the part where I tried to add a vignette by darkening off the corners of the background with a second layer. Instead of fading them off gracefully into the background like I normally would, I had to go all the way back to the inner edge of the middle figure to avoid hard lines from forming. This is a quick little close-up clip of what it looks like when you layer one wash on top of another, even when you're using staining colors. And extremely soft brushes. The good news is that for the most part, you can soften off the edges once a layer dries, even with this staining phthalo pigment, but it is an added step that I don't usually have to deal with. The good news in all of this is that that wash is freaking gorgeous. It dried into beautiful blues and greenish yellows, really showing you where this brand shines in my opinion, and that is their specialty granulating colors. This one is ocean blue. If you are just going for a straight wet on wet effect, these colors make it worth your while. After the background dried, it was time for me to work on the main figure, so I'll tell you a little bit more about the subject of this painting and why I chose him for this review, despite knowing how difficult it would be. For the uninitiated, this painting is fan art of a character called Mollymauk Tealeaf from the second campaign of Critical Role, a Dungeons & Dragons stream featuring some really incredible voice actors who use a game to improvise amazing storytelling. For those wondering why on earth anyone would sit around watching other people play Dungeons & Dragons, aside from my response being that other people can do whatever they enjoy doing, of course, is that these actors do more than just play a tabletop game. They have wonderfully detailed characters with rich backstories that take form over the course of more than 100 episodes. Matthew Mercer is the dungeon master, who many of our younger audience here might know more readily as McCree from Overwatch, is a master in world creation and has created an abundance of characters, landscapes, and events for the players to experience and grow with over time. I have spent countless hours watching these amazing humans create entertainment. I've laughed with the cast, I've gasped and exclaimed during tense reveals, and I have done more than my fair share of crying alongside them. This show is literally my favorite form of entertainment that I've ever consumed, and I actually consider my life richer for having experienced it. So all that to say, yeah, I wanted to create some fan art to show my appreciation. I held off as long as I have because a lot of the characters in the show are primarily humanoid, and of course that is not my strong suit. However, Molly is a character that I knew I wanted to paint for a friend of mine, and when I fell in love with the purples from the Roman Szmal Aquarius line, I figured I should probably take the opportunity to make it happen. About Molly himself, he is a completely over-the-top, ostentatious lavender tiefling played by Taliesin Jaffe, and the character was described by one of the other cast members as being both a literal and figurative peacock. Tieflings in the world of D&D are humanoid creatures that are infused with a touch of the fiendish planes, usually having horns and tails. Molly in particular has piercings and jewelry adorning his horns and many tattoos, most obviously the peacock feathers running up his neck and on the side of his face, which you'll see a little bit later in the painting process. I can't say too much more about Molly without spoiling his character for others who haven't seen the show, but I will say that he very much radiated confidence, advocated for living in the moment, and personified overcoming inner demons. While he's not personally my favorite character on the show, he is my friend's favorite, which is why I wanted to paint him, and I really love his character design. I ended up loving the end result of this painting, though I admittedly would have had more fun painting it had the paints not been fighting me the entire time. So back to the paints themselves, I primarily used dioxazine violet for the base purple skin tones, shadow violet exclusively on the horns, and a mixture of perylene violet and shadow violet for his hair. The shadows on his skin were dioxazine violet mixed with the shadow violet, and the highlights and blush on his face were dioxazine violet mixed with a touch of the anthraquinone red. Throughout the painting, you'll see that shadow violet separating into a violet made from the red and the blue pigments, as well as the granulating green separating from the other two. The variety of colors that you get going from the mass tone to a tinted out wash is vast, making for some really interesting colors and textures. I was pretty worried about his solid red eyes and the character design, but I hope and think they turned out pretty expressive considering. The only colors in this piece that weren't from Roman Szmal were the cobalt teal used on the peacock feathers and the metallics for the jewelry, which is why neither of them will get much airtime in this video, just in case you were wondering. The rest of this painting process is played at twice the speed that it was in real life, and obviously a lot of it was cut out because 15 hours, but despite how long the painting took to create, I wanted to make sure not to speed up the footage too fast so that you can really get a feel for how this brand handles. I hope that it's still useful, or at very least calming to watch, even if I'm not narrating every bit of it, and like I mentioned at the top of the video, I have a real-time tutorial of the tiger over on Patreon if you want to watch the entire unedited process, along with some higher resolution scans of the swatch cards. Are these paints beautiful? Yes. Would I recommend them to a loose style painter who doesn't use a lot of softening off and loves vibrant colors? Definitely. An artist who uses line art and doesn't worry about their edges? Sure. Would I recommend them to a beginner? Probably not. I certainly wouldn't recommend them to artists who like having a firm control over their medium like I do, unless you don't mind a lot of extra time spent on every edge. I think I'll be using these when I want that gorgeous granulation or in a quick sketchbook study, but otherwise I can't really see myself picking these up over my more reliable staples like Da Vinci, Daniel Smith, and Schmincke. To each their own though, and I know that these paints are perfect for other artists out there. I hope that videos like this one help to show you why a certain brand works for one person and might not work for someone else, so that you can apply those to your own practices and make the best decision for the type of painter that you are. I can't say this brand is bad or this brand is great, because there are equal drawbacks and benefits, and how you want to weight those depends on what is important to you. If you want to see the full range of colors from this brand, don't forget to check out the other content creators' links in the description below, and don't forget that I would love to hear from you too. Do you have these paints? Do you love working with them, or do they fight you a bit like they did for me? Do you have any tips, tricks, or favorite colors? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you all again for sticking with me while I was away from the channel. 2020 and its accompanying cloud of depression has been pretty darn debilitating for me, as it has been for many. I am working as much as I can to get back on track while also practicing self-care. We just gotta take things one day at a time. I'm glad to be back though. I missed all of you very, very much, and I hope you all are doing as well as possible given the circumstances. Much love and appreciation to all of my patrons for keeping me going through all of this, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of this video with the Molly-inspired tunes. Until next time, my friends, happy painting.